Welcome to How to Cope with a Loved One with a Mental Illness. I'm Bethay, a peer at Here Tomorrow, located in Neptune Beach. We offer non-clinical emotional support as certified recovery peer specialists. This workshop is just for information. By the end of this presentation, hopefully you'll have some great ideas about obtaining mental health treatment for your loved one or yourself. Let's get started. How about you? How do you feel? Probably pretty frustrated and at your wit's end because you're here. But I mean, how do you feel about being in this situation with this individual? If you look at the words that pop up on the slide, ashamed, hurt, embarrassed, angry, blaming yourself, guilty, or grief, know that those are normal feelings for someone that's in your situation and that you're not alone. What does mental illness look like? I'm probably asking the expert, but by way of normalizing your experience, I wanted to share with you what other humans that also love someone experiencing a mental illness observe. Take a few moments to read through these different columns and see how many of these factors you can identify in your loved one. Social withdrawal, irregular expression of feelings, thought and mood disturbances, and changes in behavior. Your loved one may be exhibiting certain tendencies or behaviors from certain categories and not others. There's no hard and fast rule, but you get the idea. Substance abuse is very common as a co-occurring condition. How many of these factors resonate with you and your loved one? It's time to put you to work. Grab a sheet of paper or your journal, and we're going to pause the video in a moment for a quick brainstorm. When the crisis hit, you have strategies. I want you to take a few moments to list out the strategies that you currently use, good and bad, that work or don't work when crises emerge with your loved one. Pause the video, take a minute. While these de-escalation techniques may seem self-evident, it is easy to forget the basics when things heat up. And let's face it, some of us have other people living in the home that stir the pot in a way that's out of our control. Those around you may exacerbate the situation with their behaviors or their words, but you have the option to control your own responses. My personal goal is to be the calm in the storm. Often I am the calm, and unfortunately, sometimes I'm still part of the storm's creation. It's progress. It's my job to persevere and keep opting for my own self-growth. As you read through this list, staying calm, avoiding overreacting, listening, note, avoid continuous eye contact. This is, of course, contingent upon cultural factors, but there's evidence that many people perceive an implicit challenge to a prolonged gaze. Simply asking, how can I support you right now? How can I help you at this time? Sometimes we forget to ask when we're so busy trying to fix it. You may want to avoid that, trying to fix it, or offering advice, or comparing their situation. If you've done it before and it hasn't been helpful, ditch the strategy and try responding intentionally instead of reacting. Keep the stimulation level low. If the TV's blaring, there's music in the background, bright fluorescent lights on, see what you can do to control those external factors. Offer options instead of trying to take control. I call this one the red shoe, blue shoe. So you have a small child, they're throwing a fit because they want to go out, they don't want to put on their shoes. Eventually you say, look, you can put on the red shoes or the blue shoes. The subtext is you're wearing shoes. So if someone is emotionally out of control, they're verbally explosive, then perhaps one idea would be to offer options. Look, I can run a quick errand to give you some alone time, or we could go on a walk together. Subtext, there's a boundary to what behaviors I will accept. Gently say what you're going to do before you do it. Hey, I'm going to go turn off that lamp. Validate, validate, validate. It's a manner of practicing active listening. One way is you can rephrase or summarize what you think you hear and let the person correct you if you're off. You may just want to let go of the alleged facts, okay? Who cares? During a crisis, validation sounds something like this. I can tell that you're frustrated. Or, I understand why this would upset you. Or, oh, I get why you would be angry in this situation. You may want to just ask questions about their feelings. A crisis is often all about the emotions, but we spend our time trying to fix the problem. Maybe you can really assist by just listening and getting your loved one to describe their feelings as much as possible so that they release that energy and the situation can get diffused. Oftentimes people don't think they're being judgmental, but when they're trying to fix and control something, it comes off that way. Anytime the word should is being said, you might want to rephrase it with a question. Instead of, you should, maybe ask, do you think that it would be a good idea to? When someone is emotionally volatile or in their feels, whether they suffer from a mental illness or not, that might possibly be the worst time to try and argue or reason with a person. So don't even bother. Stick to the questions. So after hearing this, are there any new strategies that you might be willing to consider, or any that you can identify that really are doing a disservice to you and your loved one? What if the situation is life-threatening or there's serious property damage? You gotta call. But know that when you do dial 911, you can ask for the CIT, or the Crisis Intervention Team, that are officers trained to work with people with mental illness. Let them know if your loved one is armed or unarmed, because their safety is paramount. And know that when the cops show up, you are no longer in control of the situation. Relinquish the scene to the officers to allow them to do their thing. Here are some further tips in case you do need to call law enforcement, but know that safety is the most important. So don't hesitate if you find yourself in that situation. One of the most effective strategies I can offer is to create a crisis plan. A crisis plan is a written plan created in conjunction with your loved one when that person is feeling well and others in the community or that live in the home. It's individualized to describe exactly what steps your loved one would like for you to take when something happens, so that you can honor them by taking the steps that best support their needs. More on a crisis plan at the end of the presentation. I've been talking a lot about crisis, but what about just day-to-day living? Let's do this. Rate your readiness. On a scale of 1 to 10, what is your ability to support your loved one at this time? How would you rate the quality of balance in your life? And lastly, how likely are you to resolve this issue? The first two questions, I don't know where you might have fallen on the scale, but the last one is a trick question. I admit it. You're not likely to resolve this issue. but you can be a loving supporter that has some good strategies to cope. When discussing coping strategies for daily living, it's worth it to re-emphasize empathy and validation. Empathy sounds like this: I don't know how to help you, and I'm sorry you're hurting. But it doesn't sound like, I don't know how to help you, and I'm sorry you're hurting, but at least you got a roof over your head. It's not just the words we say, but the tone with which we say them. Those comparisons aren't helpful. Validation sounds like, I know you're angry right now. That must be hard. Stay away from the but. So many times we want to validate and we say, gosh, that sounds so hard, but. And anything after that might come off like an invalidation. So when you're tempted, stay away from the buts and the shoulds and stick to the questions. Learn the symptoms and then stop taking them personally. Easier said than done. When we compare mental illness to a physical illness, if someone were, shaking from insulin or throwing up, you can't say, stop it, quit choosing to do that. But with mental illness, let's face it, you know your loved one's symptoms. If we were face to face, you could probably tell me how they behave when their mental illness creeps up. So when you see those symptoms, attempt to not view them as choices and take offense. Recognize them and don't take them personal. That's a tough one. Resist the urge to say, try harder. Similar comparison with a physical disease. If someone were having an asthma attack, you couldn't say, try harder, breathe more. It's not even safe. So if someone is exhibiting startling or disturbing symptoms of mental illness, they can't try harder at that time. Research treatment options. There's a ton out there. Medication, talk therapy, group therapy, outpatient, inpatient, residential. Lots of options, but none of them are for you to pick up and execute. You're a supporter. You can be ready with some options for your loved one if that individual decides that he or she is ready to make improvements on their situation. Do your homework. Be ready to plant that seed. Let go of your timetable. Maybe in your mind, you think if my loved one would just go to therapy or go into residential treatment or take this medicine in a few weeks or in a few months, he or she would be better. But it's not our timetable to decide. Think again about those physical ailments. If you had a loved one with cancer, you would kind of make a one-time decision. Did it matter if they chose chemo or if it metastasized? You would stay with them for the highs and the lows. It's the kind of dedication that perhaps would best serve your loved one suffering from a mental illness. To resolve to love and respect them. There's a caveat to that. There are situations in which I have known supporters and caregivers that are carrying burdens that are not theirs to carry. Only you can decide about your own personal safety and emotional well-being and whether or not this person warrants that important one-time decision to stick it out. Not all situations do, but if you decide to stay, let go of that timetable. Encourage outside support and know that you alone cannot fix it. It's not even your job to fix somebody else. It's so hard to see someone that we love suffering, but the best thing you can do is build a community of supporters, not just around the person that you love that's suffering, but around yourself. Finally, remember, when they're struggling, they're not monsters, and when they get better, they're not new people. Mental illness is an illness, and it can change somebody's circumstances, personalities, interests, and their spirit for a time, but they're still the same person that you've always loved, and they need you to see that in them, especially when they can't see themselves clearly. NAMI is an organization that offers a lot of help and support to supporters and caregivers. Let's take a look at their 8-minute video and see what their suggestions are for loving someone with a mental illness.
I think caregiving is one of the hardest things because as a caregiver, we're giving of ourselves. We're watching somebody that we don't have control over and that we can't be fully responsible for, but we love them so much. We care about them so deeply. And through NAMI support groups, caregivers get support. Caregivers are encouraged to participate in wellness activities and to keep themselves well. And I think sometimes people need that permission, and NAMI gives them that permission.
Caregiving is so important. As a psychologist, I consider myself a caregiver. As a family member who has a family member that experiences depression and anxiety, this is a time that we need to honor what we've done because we know that the work of a caregiver can cause some stress, can cause some anxiety. Even though we want to be there for everyone, it's really important to take a step back, take a couple deep breaths, and take care of you. Because once you take care of you, you can do anything.
I encourage everybody that's a caregiver to take some time to take care of yourself, whatever that is. Find your joy, whether it's nature, whether it's, reading a book. That's super important. I also encourage you, just enjoy regular family time with your loved one. Put it aside and just be a family. I encourage people to do that also. Don't lose sight of that. And do what you need to do to take care of your own mental health, whether it's to seek out your own therapist, a NAMI support group, a NAMI education class. That's really important.
So 3 things I do for self-care. Get my feet done. Buy me wigs. I got enough wigs to open up my own wig store. I love wigs, different colors, all kinds, short. And I take 20 minutes to myself a day. Sometimes I can't get a whole 20 minutes because I'm having meetings, so I have to break it down to 5 minutes or 2 minutes, but I make sure every day I get at least 20 minutes to myself for my own sanity.
He says, I know you need help yourself. There's a support group that I want you to try. Go and look it up, NAMI.org. Surely enough, I found a support group and I found a family. I found a place that was safe, where I could speak, where I wasn't judged. And I will never forget that night we talked about self-care. And they mentioned how you put on your oxygen mask first before you put it on your child. And I had not been doing that. I was just focused on her challenges. We were in and out of hospitals. I was focused on work, on my other daughter, on my relationship with my husband, church, volunteering, etc. And really not taking care of myself, not sleeping, worrying about what if. And then I started running. One of the things that we promised that night is, what is everybody, raise your hand to, what are you going to do for yourself before the next support group? I said, I'm going to go out and run. And here I am, 3 marathons in since that time. And it's been a relief for me, but also I think an example for my daughter, that we need to take time for ourselves and to check in with ourselves.
My self-care is walking. I walk every morning. My husband and I walk. I take care of my grandchildren a lot, and on any day that I'm just even feeling sad, they're, thank God, close enough to me, so I pick one up and go. They are my total joy. And my other one is being a part of a support group. And I leave that support group every week inspired by watching the way people are getting through all of this.
We found, my wife and I, that friends, family, and even our faith community did not fully appreciate the challenges that we were facing as a family. And so being with others who understood, being with others who you could talk to about what you might be going through, understanding what they were going through, and being supportive was extremely powerful for us. It wasn't so much the sharing, it was the understanding, it was the encouragement, it was the practical tips, and sometimes it was just being there for one another. Sometimes just being there without words can be very, very powerful for those who sometimes feel like they're facing this all alone.
Now, I'm a caregiver for one of my beautiful parents diagnosed with schizophrenia. For self-care, I get together with my girls every Wednesday, and we play games, like just, regular card games or karaoke or whatever it is, like whatever we choose to do on that Wednesday, we get together and we just have a good time. My daughter is spending time with her gives me opportunity just to, just be a kid again. And then one more thing, I'm spiritual, so I listen to gospel music and just music that's inspiring and empowering.
As a caregiver, and also as a person that lives with a mental health condition. And 3 things that I do for self-care is that I take time for myself, only by myself. No kids, no dogs, nobody involved. And I listen to personal development every day. And I try to stay active every day, even if it is a 15-minute walk.
Sleep to me is like the forgotten, core principle of health. And I just know that when I prioritize my sleep, I have more to give. The second thing that I would say is, this is very authentic for me, I love solitude, which is not necessarily something that a caregiver gets a lot of or feels like they can ask for. But as a mom of 2 little kids and a caregiver and a wife, taking time by myself to go do things is the most important thing I found that makes me feel whole. So even 3 weeks ago, I took a trip by myself for 2 days, and I rode all the rides, and I walked, and I listened to music, and I came home feeling just so incredibly reset, which was exactly what I need. I love plants. I might kill a few, but mostly they're doing okay. And I think I have 47 plants right now at home, and I just keep growing them. And in my office, I talk to them, and it makes me feel like I'm in a jungle. But it brings me really, really, it just brings me a lot of happiness when I walk in and you see all these things that are thriving because you've cared about them. And we get to do the same thing for people. But wellness and self-care, it's finding out what makes you tick. And sometimes you have to try a few things. And families might say, I don't have the energy or the time. But it could be 5 minutes of just breathing with an app on your phone, just to feel grounded, just to feel good.
How are you feeling now? Might you be willing to reach out to your local NAMI chapter and discover some support groups or classes? Please email me at bethay.garcia@heretomorrow.org or any peer at Here Tomorrow to receive a page that will provide you with the links to family support groups and information about writing your own crisis plan with a sample plan for you to follow, plus a couple of articles. Thank you for joining us for How to Cope with a Loved One with Mental Illness. We hope that you've discovered some new strategies and ideas and that you're leaving with a renewed sense of hope. Please reach out to peers for more workshop offerings and take care of you.